guys, welcome back to Quality Coffee Break, where we like to talk about the concepts of 13485 in small bite-sized coffee-sized chunks. Today, we're going to talk about change control and change management. It's in my opinion, the most critical process of 13485 for an organization's success. So I don't know if I'm alone in that, but I think it's got to be pretty high up there in most quality professionals' estimation.
I absolutely agree with you, Suzy. I think we touched on this on our last podcast, or maybe the one before that. And you said, "Oh, I think this might be quite controversial about change control being one of the most critical things in your organization, critical processes." And I don't think it's controversial, which is why we're having this whole conversation about it today, about talking about change control. Importantly, the things that could go wrong in your change control system, in change management, and essentially more tips in, what do we call them? Top tips. We had a few of the top tips, some top tips for your change control process.
That's right. So I think obviously one of the most critical things to just start with is about scheduling and timing and making sure that you're not planning too many changes to implement at the same time. I think when you're talking about the impact for your operators or whoever's going to be affected by these changes, I think we sometimes lose sight of the fact that it's a lot for them to take on and learn and understand and apply when there are many things that might be happening at the same time.
Prioritization. Yes, I agree. Prioritization has got to be really important when you're scoping out your change control. Susie's absolutely right. I agree with you. As always, I will also as always I agree with you that you put too much in your change control scope and it becomes unwieldy. You can't see the wood for the trees. And you really want to be taking people on this journey with you as you introduce changes into your QMS. So putting too much into one change control can just be too much for people.
Yeah, and I think that I think the best way to help manage this is to have a good change control committee or project committee or team meeting, an oversight group that is there to evaluate what changes are being proposed and at what time period that they're going to implement or roll out, because that's the group that can say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we've got too much going on at this point in time. Let's push this one out or see if we can't bring something else forward and maintain that list of projects or lists of changes, or that put it in a hopper and dole them out when the organization has the resources and the capability to manage it appropriately.
Absolutely. And also being that committee membership being cross-functional, I think is really important, right? So
Yes.
you've got all of these, different departments coming in, so everybody can be heard, and it's very sort of shared. And I think what's really good about having this committee is that it also empowers a lot of people in order to sort of raise potential changes within the quality system, knowing that they can present them to this committee. And I think in previous episodes, we're talking about like empowering your people and making sure that everybody is involved in your quality management system. So if they are able to raise, potential changes to a committee member, because it should be somebody who is in their department that they can raise it to. And then the committee can then organize and prioritize for the business. But I think that's a really good idea.
Yes, that's where I would start. Amy, what about you? What do you think is one of the opportunities for error, or where things can go wrong, or a solution to help prevent that?
So I think just kind of thinking about the story of change control, and it is really reflective of what we've just sort of talked about, putting way too much into your change control from off the bat. Being quite within your scope of the change control, sometimes I review these and they are just unwieldy. They're not clear. We don't have the full clarity of what is there. Remember that the verification of the effectiveness of the change is inherently going to be with regards to the scope of the change. So you want to make sure that that scope is detailed enough to be able to give you an understanding of where the direction of the changes come from, why it's there in the first place. Effectively, well, excuse me, essentially, what you need to do to correct it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Um, One of the other things that I see as problematic or something that maybe people don't do often enough is include, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Amy, in your cross-functional nature of the system, or an effective system is cross-functional in nature. And that would be to hold regular, like, if while you're in the process of making a change, right? And you've scoped it out and you've got an idea for it and a trajectory for it, I want you to have really regular meetings with um the change team. So the team of people who are involved in that specific change, and I want that team to include people from other areas, right? So because this is when you're talking, and things change and evolve and develop as you go. And so you're um as you get clarity in this change and as you're moving forward with it, you need the voices from other people to say, hey, wait a minute, did you think about how this might affect our goods in process, or did you think about how this might affect our website, or whatever else that isn't maybe top of mind when you're talking about the particular change that you're making, but is absolutely critical to an effective change.
You've just completely hit the nail on the head as to why you want a cross-functional team in anything that you do, right? Because you just have these different people that come at it from different areas of the organization. I've been recently just getting my head around risk management again. I always feel like every single time I read that standard, something new comes out. And obviously, it starts with this cross-functional team. But I think the example that you've just given is why we should be talking to each other within the organization, why things shouldn't be siloed into different things. Quality, this is a change just to do with quality. So we're just going to, put little barriers around it and not going to talk to anybody. And the same for like manufacturing. Oh, this is just a manufacturing change. We don't need to worry anybody about that. But I mean, you kind of think about it. So if you had a manufacturing change of, oh, we're just going to change the packaging because it's easier. Think what the implications of that is, or the implications of that are, if you're not going to be talking to regulatory, because inherently that's going to change all of your validation. Can you imagine if you've got all your stability all done and then, manufacturing just decide, all right, we're just going to change your packaging and then maybe labeling. It would just be an absolute chaotic nightmare. So yeah, absolutely agree. Just get everybody involved, get your committee, because you're just promoting talking to one another. You're just promoting this really nice environment in order to get everybody's opinion.
And I think that when it doesn't happen that way, like, it's not malicious in its intent. I think people, especially in small organizations like, we've been working in, you have people who feel like, I don't want to bother other people, and just like, oh, I can do these things, like, I can do 90% of this on my own, and I'll just bring in somebody here or there. And that's, I can appreciate the sentiment, but realistically, it's not that helpful because it takes longer and takes more effort to maybe dial things back when you get to, 90% done. And then you realize that there's some other impacts that you hadn't included in your scope, or that would be affected by this change that you didn't plan for at the outset. So it's just, even if you're like, you've just got like your trusted group of people and you're just like, hey, can I just run this by you? This is what I'm thinking for this change. Even that is going to be helpful and set you on your path, hopefully in the right direction.
I think that's a really good point as well, because yeah, no, it's not always, it's not, ugh, excuse me, doesn't have malicious intent. Because I think inherently, I think I speak on behalf of the British population as well. Just don't want to bother anybody. We'll just go along, and if we don't, if we can just do it, we'll just do it. But yeah, I think in a quality environment, especially with change management, in a small company, I mean, unfortunately raise my hand and say, like, younger in my career, I would have done this. Oh, I've just got this. Nobody else needs to worry about this because I can just get it done. But yeah, the absolute importance of just communicating, running things by people, because one, you get their input, don't you, to see if there's anything else that could possibly go wrong, and two, you're actively communicating with people and you're working with them, you're showing that their input is valued, which especially as a startup when you're getting to know each other, and it's really important to establish good relationships. I will say as well, you're also helping on that aspect, is encouraging teamwork there as well.
Well, and you're also benefiting from everybody else's experience and
Yeah.
knowledge, and other people
Yeah.
have really good ideas. And even people who are outside your particular area of expertise, most of the people that you're working with will have worked in other organizations and have had experiences that were both positive and negative, and, have something to contribute. And I think it's really important to respect that.
I'm thinking back to our episode on leading with empathy, right? Because that's what it is. It's hearing people and listening to people. So just remember, when you're doing change management, that empathy piece does come into it as well, because you want to hear everybody else's opinion. So yeah, I feel like that was a nice little rabbit warren to go down. I thought it was really good. As you were talking, I was reminded of something, and it actually is reflected in, like, the Kappa system as well. So we've kind of got, because you've got the verification of effectiveness of the change, right? And then obviously you've got verification of effectiveness of the Kappa actions as well. So you've got two of these things that are very, very similar. So something which is applicable to that, as well as change management, is when you get to saying, yes, the change was effective because I've implemented this. Just remember, there was a difference between implementation of the actions, which is, for example, I've, written this document and the document is now approved, to actually monitoring and seeing how effective it is. Because that's something which I've seen before, both in change management and also within the Kappa system as well. So just make sure that when you're writing your implementation actions and you're verifying that you've completed your implementations actions, that is different from verifying the effectiveness of those actions.
Yeah. What tips do you have, Amy, for small companies? You're talking about, a handful of people who
Mm.
are dealing with a lot of these changes and a lot of these kappas. It's the same group of people, right? So, do you have any top tips for right sizing that verification of effectiveness for either kappas or changes or anything else that you might have in your system? Because it's not I don't think it's reasonable to say that we're gonna have a full-on, like, internal audit for all of these changes. Um, but identifying the changes maybe where that is important, or, like, again, right sizing that verification. So how do you really manage that?
I think that's a really good question, Susie. I think it is all to do with the risk-based approach. So taking into consideration where you and your company are in terms of QMS implementation, because many startups may not have a fully implemented QMS, and you may be very early on in your design development journey. So I think that's one aspect of it. Also thinking about, if the process, so you have maybe a concept product or a product that's going through design verification or validation, so you're a bit later on in the design development stage. So if the process you're changing, or is directly, it has a direct impact in terms of the product, or maybe it's a supporting process. So I would have a think about those two things first, because it kind of frames how much assurance that you want that these verification measures are applicable. So using an example, so we had, I think this might have been to do with a kappa, but still, we were implementing a change with our supplier. So we found we had some non-conforming product, initiated a change control, worked with the supplier. Now, to verify the change was effective, we just said that we were going to look at the next couple of deliveries. Now, our deliveries with that supplier were very infrequent. So one of the things I really hate is like you must verify all actions are effective within, I don't know, 8 weeks. It might not be a big enough, it might not be a large enough time frame. So considering on, how, for in this example, we only received a delivery like once a year. So you can see how long that was coming in, in terms of gathering enough evidence to make sure that your actions were effective. So it is also, it depends. Not all quality answer, like it depends, but taking into consideration where you are on your QMS implementation journey and whether that process has a direct or indirect impact to your product. Considering those and discussing that with your cross-functional team are my two best tips.
Well, and also it brings up the point that um, if you're making a change to your product, if that's the kind of change we're talking about, that verification is going to be inherent, should be inherent in your plans because you should be talking about this is the change that we want to make. Let's review our risk files to see what we thought of this or what the impact of this change might be and identify those pieces that we want to verify formally where you have the protocol and those kinds of things. And so for your device changes and those kinds of things, there's going to be a large amount of verification that's inherent and built into it. And then, for the change controls that are minor change controls that are updates to documents, and a lot of updates to QMS documents. I mean, if I'm being honest, lots of times I kinda just say, "Yeah, that change has been made." Like, the actions are complete because we're just talking about adding a clarifying statement to the SOP or, "Oh, we've had to put it on a new template," or those kinds of things. So we're not talking about a change, with a capital C to the process. We're talking about an update or something like that. And so it's, um yeah, I mean, again, I think there's probably room for improvement there as well, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, not forgetting that the QMS is always monitored,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So inherently, as a business, because you have your quality objectives, you got your quality policy, quality objectives, built from that. So as a business, you are identifying what is important to keep an eye on because those are your core values as a business. So you have quality objectives set against all those things. In addition, you've got your internal audit process, which is going to be going round. Let's say it doesn't have to be annually, but usually they are. You audit your processes annually. So I always think, for minor changes such as, little c changes that, you've just mentioned, I don't see any problem with that because it's that risk-based approach. 1345 is always and always will be interpreted slightly differently by different organizations. But as long as you as an organization are happy with that control, I don't think there's anything wrong with it because just don't forget that you do always have those monitoring, you're monitoring how effective your QMS is. So I think it's good.
Yeah, and you're also monitoring your product as well when you're on
Mhm.
market, right? So even those big C changes that
Mm,
include verifications and things like that, you still have I mean, you still have opportunities to identify if that wasn't the right move.
mm.
Now, hopefully, you've done all of that work and that pre-work and your experimental work and all those things to ensure that that change is going to be successful and that's the right thing to do. But after that, even after your verification, you have if you're in regular manufacture, you have your product QC activities. You have your complaints process and your stakeholder feedback process. So the market will let you know if there was something that didn't quite work out. You just have to pay attention to it. And of course, as a good quality professional, you are because it's also part of the standard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also highlights a really good point is that don't feel the need to implement a new verification method when what you can do is pull from what you're already doing, maybe over a 6-month period. I
Absolutely.
you don't have to create something completely brand new. You can always utilize what you've currently got in your QMS. So I think that's a good tip.
So, Amy, what do you think about the integration of change control and change management with the clause in clause 4 on quality planning?
Yeah, so that quality planning it's a really good statement because it links to the quality management system planning. So 542 in management commitment and management responsibility. So if I just read out this little clause here, so the integrity of the QMS is maintained when changes to the QMS are planned and implemented. So what this really means for me is that if you're planning a change to your QMS, so for example, you are a IVD manufacturer, manufacturing is wonderful in vitro diagnostics, and then all of a sudden you want to make an implantable device. I don't know why. Maybe someone's had a bright idea. Brilliant. Let's be fully supportive of this. So now you need to change your QMS because obviously there are additional clauses in section 7, aren't there, which are to do specifically with implantable devices. However, what you don't want to do is just be like, okay, so let's put our energy and then let's bolt on these additional clauses here. Because remember that your QMS is this like is this creature, right? So everything is connected. This is how I like to think about QMS. I don't know if you do, it helps me. So you don't want to, and this might sound a bit weird to kind of think about a QMS as being this like sentient being, but you don't want to shock it, do you? You want to kind of introduce it. So the how I explain it to my colleagues is that you always want to introduce something into the QMS, otherwise it gets a bit shocked and it doesn't really work. So when you are introducing these new clauses into your QMS, you want to be, planning in product realization, so design development, you're going to want to update that procedure and be like, oh, hey, if you're doing this, make sure you follow this. Because the worst thing you can do is just bolt on those additional procedures and they don't connect with your QMS anywhere. So for me, I really feel like that's what this clause is getting at. If you are planning a big change to your QMS, which means additional clauses, please make sure it communicates with the rest of it and make sure that you've got a good plan to make sure that the integration of those new clauses are planned accordingly. You know, Obviously, quality manual needs to be updated. In this example, design development will need to be updated and logically quite a few other things. Validation, probably validation of sterile barriers if it's going to be, sterilized before going out to the customer. So yeah, all of these things that you would need to have a think about. So for me, that's how it fits.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another segue or another introduction into the benefits of a cross-functional team. And, like let's brainstorm together if we're going to bring on this new type of device, this new category of device, by bringing in implantables. What do we need to do? Who's got ideas about where this might have an effect? And also, who's got experience working with implantable organizations before, implantable manufacturers before?
I'm
Because
so
yeah.
sorry. I was really excited 'cause I was so glad you picked that up because it was just like this is a whole new skill set.
Yeah.
Whole new skill set. So you've got to think about resources. So you think about all of resource management. So you got to think about human resources that you're going to need in there, and potentially new infrastructure as well. Clean rooms. Ooh, clean rooms. How potentially gamma sterilization. So all of these things that would have to then go into your quality plan because this is an entirely new thing.
Yeah. But I also think that in discussing, like in an audit like event, and
Mm.
somebody's talking to you about the quality planning, to me, this is how all of it integrates. Quality planning is perhaps an umbrella term for all of these activities that occur in change management, and in if you have a different project management team, if you have it's in management review, it's in even in your kappa program as well, can integrate as well. All of those represent aspects of that quality planning clause.
And even when you're starting out, you don't need everything right away. You don't need everything right away. You can just start off with documentation. Just do documentation first. How are you going to do that? How are you going to make sure people understand what's in your documentation? Training. Okay, so if you're a startup, it's typically that you're going to be in design development. Implement that. Implement design development. Then you're like, okay, well, design development needs risk management. Implement your risk management. So that there are all these things that you can do within a QMS plan to make it easier to implement your QMS, right from the start. And inherently, that will help you sort of think about the change management side of things as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. What a great conversation, Amy. I love talking about change management, although I never expected that that would be my life, but I do. Do like talking about change management because it is the drum I beat quite often. As in, if you're really good at change management, your organization has a much higher chance at success.
Yeah, absolutely. Encourages communication, it encourages that cross-functional team, all of which are really important for 1345. So I, as always, could not agree more.
Well, then, fair viewer and listener, until next time, don't panic.
Read the SOP.
Bye.